Welcome back to the channel. We are going to talk about the weekends and why is it that we can't stay on track during the weekend. We have social events, we have crazy schedules, and sometimes we're just sick and tired of being so restrictive during the week that we want a break on the weekends, and then we lose all of our progress and we start over again on Monday. I want to talk about 6 ways that we can make the weekends fit better into your lifestyle and that you can still make progress and have fun on the weekends. So go grab your coffee, let's get this thing started. Okay, so the first way you can stay on track during the weekends is to plan. And so what I mean by that is treat your weekend days just like you treat Monday through Friday. Monday through Friday, you sit down and you kind of plan out your calorie strategy for the day or the next day. You know what you're going to eat, how much for breakfast. You put it in your app or you write it in your spreadsheet. You plan your nutrition very differently during the week than you do on the weekends. Sometimes we feel like the weekends are like, hey, I don't have to do anything, it's my break and whatever. That's where we get into trouble. So, doesn't mean you have to be necessarily as tailored on the weekends, but go into your weekend with a plan of some kind. Because if you don't plan, that's where all the trouble happens. So planning, whether it's deciding where you're gonna have a meal out, or if you're going to try to track your calories on the weekend, how are your days gonna look nutritionally, put in some time and treat your weekends just like you treat your weekdays. That's gonna help significantly. Let's go on to the second tip. Okay, so the second tip is to eat lean protein and vegetables throughout the course of the day. So for instance, if you know on Saturday night you're gonna go out with a bunch of friends, there's probably gonna be drinks, appetizers, whatever, nice big meal with people. You wanna eat kind of light through the course of the day up to that point, as light as you can. And the best way to do that without you feeling starving all the time during the day is to eat some lean protein and vegetables as your main source for even breakfast and lunch. That's gonna help you keep full. You're not gonna be starving by the time you go out, which is gonna be good. So then you're not gonna eat all the food in sight. You're gonna get a lot of nutrients on board. You're gonna feel good, but you're not gonna feel famished, like you have to eat everything in sight. So loading up protein and veg throughout the course of the day, that's also gonna keep your calories in check up to that point. It's probably gonna give you maybe a little bit more wiggle room with calories at night as well. Will you go over your calories at night? Maybe, and probably actually, but it's probably gonna be more in control than if you completely didn't eat at all during the course of the day and then you're starving by the time you go out and you're eating, drinking everything in sight. So you've now brought something that was out of control back in control. So protein and vegetables throughout the course of the day before you go out. That's your second tip. Now let's get to the third tip. Okay, the third tip is to create for yourself what are called bright lines. I love this concept as much as anything else because it's super simple and it's super effective. And it's interesting because I have so many people tell me that this just doesn't sound like it would ever work, but it does work. So let's talk about what are bright lines. Bright lines are rules that you give yourself that are non-negotiable. You give yourself these rules or expectations before you go to an event. So let's say, for example, Saturday night you're going to a social event. You know there's going to be a lot of alcohol there. There's going to be a lot of great foods, a lot of that finger food stuff that we continuously eat all night. You know there's going to be a lot of that, and maybe even some of your favorite foods. You know that night could get out of hand very, very quickly, very easily as well. So you want to try to stay on track, or you want to try to have some control over the situation. You're starting to feel a little bit anxious. You've done really well with your diet up to this point. You are afraid to go to this event because you're just going to go crazy. So give yourself a bright line. So let's say a bright line could be, okay, I'm going to go to this event and I'm going to allow myself 2 drinks. Once I'm done with those 2 drinks, I go to seltzer water or coffee or something like that. But 2 drinks, after 2 drinks, I stop with the alcohol. Another bright line for that same event could be, I'm going to allow myself 1 plate of food. That's it. I'm going to take a plate. I'm going to put whatever I want on that plate. I'm going to pile it as high as I can make it fit. But I'm going to take this small plate and I'm going to put food on it. I'm not going to go back for any other food after that plate is gone. And you could even take that bright line a step further and say, I'm going to look at the food that's there and I'm going to pick out the one food that I love. So let's use chocolate chip cookies are sitting there on that table. Some freshly made chocolate chip cookies. Because let me tell you something, there's nothing better on the planet than that, at least in my opinion. So you say, okay, I'm gonna have as many chocolate chip cookies as I want, but I'm not gonna have anything else. I'm limiting myself to one food, one type of food, and I chose chocolate chip cookies. What research shows is that you're bound to eat far less when you don't have so many choices in front of you. So if you give yourself the limitation, the bright line before you go, that I am only going to eat one type of food, chances are the quantity will be way less than if you allow yourself to have as much food of anything as you want with no limitations. So I've talked about a couple different bright lines. You could have the alcohol bright line. You could have the food bright line, 1 plate of food, whatever you want on it, or you could say, I want 1 specific food and as much of that as I want. A lot of different ways to do bright lines, but what bright lines do, and this is the most important part about bright lines, and that is they take any anxiety you might have about going off track at this event out of the equation, because you know going in what's going to happen. You already know that because you've already set your bright lines. This is super effective. It works all the time, and what's really interesting about this is that you will discover that you can actually go to an event. You don't have to drink 6 drinks and have a good time. You could have 2 drinks and have just as good a time with 2 drinks as you could with 6. You will start sipping on seltzer water and still be able to enjoy your friends, your family, the company, and have a great time. You can still partake in the food, but you give yourself a limit. Bright lines are super effective. You can apply them to anything, but the key to bright lines is giving yourself the bright line ahead of time. So before you leave the house, you need to know what's going to happen. You don't make it when you're in the middle of all of this because you're probably not going to be able to do that as effectively. Know before you leave the house how the night's going to pan out. 2 drinks, 1 plate of food, I'm going to have a great time. You will notice your anxiety level just come down, and it'll make the evening way more enjoyable. And the last thing I want to say about bright lines is this, that you could still possibly and most likely go over your calories. But like I said in the last tip, it's far better to have some sort of limitations, guidelines, bright lines, and keep things under control than it is no limits, no nothing, and then you feel anxious the whole night, and then even worse, you feel terrible the next day, and you feel like you've ruined everything, which you haven't. But we get over the whole guilt process because you took control before you left. So bright lines, give yourself some bright lines before you go out to dinner, before you go to the event, and stick to them. And you will be amazed at how effective they are for keeping you on track. Now let's get to the next tip. Okay, so the next tip on how you can stay on track on a weekend is think about maybe banking or cycling your calories from the week. So what that means is some days, maybe during the week, have lower calories, and the calories that you are saving, you can add to your weekend. some people call it banking calories. You're saving calories from Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or Monday through Thursday, let's say. You're eating lower calories than your calorie deficit. And the remainder of those calories you can bank and add them to your weekends. So now you're still averaging out in a calorie deficit, but you've just kind of reconfigured where your calories are going during the week. That's called calorie cycling. That's the beauty of calorie cycling, is that you can manipulate your calories throughout the course of a week and weekend to accommodate your schedule. It gives you a little bit more wiggle room where you want the wiggle room. As long as your weekly average comes out to a calorie deficit, you're still going to be losing weight. And even if it doesn't come out to a calorie deficit for you, maybe you went over a little bit, it's a little high, in the bigger picture, this little couple days of not being too off track, you're a little off track, you're not, stop for a second. What was I trying to say about that? Back again. Okay, the next tip for staying on track for the weekend is that you could potentially bank your calories. So what does that mean? It means that you could stay in a calorie deficit Monday through Thursday, let's say, but you're going to lower your calories from where your normal deficit would be. So for example, let's say your normal deficit is 1,600. Maybe do 1,400 instead. So those extra 200 calories you now can save for the weekend. If you know you're going out, you could save 200 on Monday, 200 on Tuesday, 200 on Wednesday. However many days you want to bank those calories, you can take them and apply them to your weekend if you know you're going to be out and about, you're going to be eating out, you have an event or whatever. Banking calories is also known as calorie cycling. You're just manipulating your calories. Some days are lower, some days are higher, but your weekly average is still a calorie deficit for you. That's the beauty of calorie cycling. You can set it up however you need to set it up to accommodate your schedule. And one method of calorie cycling is called a weekend warrior method, where basically you save calories throughout the week to apply to the weekends, because you want your weekends to be able to have a little bit more flexibility with your calories. And so you can save them from the week and put them on the weekend. As long as you balance out your low and high and your weekly average comes out to a calorie deficit, you're doing great. And honestly, even if you go above your average a little bit in the bigger picture, it's not going to be that big of a deal. But calorie cycling is a great thing to consider. And there's no like right or wrong, like how many calories do I have to go lower? How many can I bank? You get to decide that. That's the beauty of this. You get to decide how low you are willing to go to save calories for a special event or something like that. So calorie cycling is something for you to consider to stay on track for the weekends as well. Let's get to the next tip. Okay, so the next tip for staying on track for the weekend is have your first meal of the day on track. So what I mean is have your normal breakfast or your normal lunch or whatever time you eat. Have your normal meal that meets your calorie and protein requirements. Start your weekend on track. I think that's really important for a couple reasons. Number one is a mindset perspective. You are starting off what might be a crazy day with something that grounds you, something that you're familiar with, something that you know. It's going to clear your mind. You're going to feel in control. I think that's super important with starting off your weekend with something normal. I think that will actually pull the reins in on the weekend for you as well, but you're not going to think that you're out of control from the get-go. You are in control. And it can also save you calories. You know, you are eating your normal breakfast and you could possibly be saving some calories for you for the rest of the day. But eat lean protein and vegetables like I talked about earlier, and include that as part of your normal first meal of the day. And you're gonna set yourself up for maybe a less hectic weekend. You're gonna feel better about yourself because your whole weekend hasn't been blown. If you think it's blown, it hasn't been, because you have actually started off with one of your normal meals. You're gonna feel better physically, and you're gonna feel better about the weekend that's laying ahead of you. So start off that first meal, keep that super on track, just like normal. Let's get to the last tip. Okay, so the last tip is just something I want you to understand about the whole concept of weekends and crazy schedules and eating out and all that kind of stuff. And that is, look, being in a deficit, the goal here is not perfection. It never has been. The goal is just about consistency and understanding that one meal out isn't going to ruin your progress, whether that meal out's on a Saturday or Sunday or whatever. It's not. And in all honesty, a day off track, 2 days off track is not going to ruin anything. Where it becomes a problem is when you tend to be more off track than on track. And that's where the balance gets tipped. And so having an occasional weekend that's just kind of crazy, that happens to all of us. That's not going to ruin anything. But when every single weekend is out of control and you're not applying any of this, you're just going for a free-for-all every weekend, that is the issue. So hopefully all of these ideas maybe gives you some ideas on how you can structure your weekend so you are in control, understanding that they're not going to be perfect, and that's okay. And the one thing I want to leave you with out of all of this is, if you do get off track, you just have to hop right back on track the very next meal. That's it. Because that's how you're going to keep your progress going in the bigger picture. Just understand that you haven't ruined anything by going out for dinner on a Saturday night. Feeling in control at that dinner Saturday night is a different ballgame, and that's where these ideas can maybe help you with that. Perfection's not our goal here. Our goal is consistency over time. You can use some of these to apply to your weekends. If you feel like you're constantly starting over on Monday, start taking a look at how your week is. Maybe your week is too restrictive to begin with. That's another idea to help you maybe examine your week. But just keep after this. Weekends are tough. We've all lived them, and I think being realistic, trying some of these, and I think you're going to be fine. Let's keep them in control. That's the ultimate goal. Keep your weekends in control. Have a great time. Thank you for being here. And if I can help you, please let me know. Put some comments down below, click subscribe, and we will see you next time.